Welcome to NorCal Slot Car Scene. In this video, we're going to go through the process I used to install a screw-in guide on a slot car. We're going to use the NSR BMW Z4 GT3, but the principles here will apply to any slot car. Let's take the body off the car and get started. As you can see here, the stock guide has quite a bit of slop in it, and that's the reason we want to use the screw-in guide. The screw-in guide will not necessarily make the car any faster, but it will make it more predictable. The first thing to do is check for any flashing around the guidepost and take it off with a hobby knife. We really want to make sure the top of that post is absolutely flat. Next, cut a couple pieces of braid to size. Cut them a little bit longer than you think, because we will be trimming them later. I use the NSR Super Racing Braid. It's extremely thin and very soft. It's amazing how much difference a thin, soft braid can make in the handling of the car, and I put this on every car I run. Make sure you use a sharp pair of scissors when you cut the braid. This will make a nice clean cut and make it very easy to insert the braid into the guide. I insert it from the top, and as you see here, put just a little slight bend towards the back away from the hole where the eyelet's going to attach the lead wire. Then fold the braid underneath into the normal position. Now we're ready to mount the guide to the chassis. But first, remove the entire front wheel and tire assembly. With the guide now installed in the chassis but not yet screwed in, it's time to get the setup block. Make sure you use the correct side of the setup block depending on whether you're setting this up for a braided track or a copper tape track. Now let's check the ride height of the chassis relative to the setup block. With the rear wheels installed, I like to set the front ride height so the chassis sits relatively level or with just a slight rake to the front of the car. On this setup, I had to use two of the thin washers to get the chassis to the ride height that I wanted. Now it's time to install the screw and lock the guide in place. Take your time with this and make sure that screw goes in straight. Oil both on top of the guide and underneath the guide where it meets the chassis. We want as little friction as possible. We're ready now to install the lead wires. NSR uses eyelets that are simply press fit into the guide. By this time the braid may have bunched up a little bit and it may be difficult to insert the eyelet into the hole. So I take either a toothpick or just one of my Allen wrenches and just run it around and make that hole just slightly larger so the eyelet can press in easily. Once both lead wires are attached, make sure you've got a nice loop in the front that gives a little springing action so the guide is now self-centering. Now it's time to trim the excess length of the braid. As we did before, make sure you use a sharp pair of scissors so you get a nice clean cut. I like the braid to lay as flat as possible with just a little angle towards the back of the guide. Here's the braid ready to go. On some tracks you may have to adjust the braid slightly as you see here to make good contact. Now that we're finished with the guide, reinstall the front wheel axle assembly and we're done. The only thing left to do is reinstall the body and we're ready to go racing. Thanks for watching. This is Jim Rose with NorCal Slot Car Scene.